Commissioners versus Des Moines Independent Community School District at Allen.
In 1965, Mary Beth Tinker and her peers wore black armbands to school to protest the Vietnam War. Their consequent suspension ignited a fierce legal battle, urging America to confront whether young Americans forfeit their constitutional rights at school. The Supreme Court's landmark ruling affirmed that students have both the right and the responsibility to engage in civic discourse in an educational setting. While school officials argued that student activism threatened order in the classroom, the Tinker case proved that student expression serves as a vital safeguard for democracy itself, a legacy echoing in every walkout from Birmingham to the March of Our Lives. The 1960s were a time of significant political upheaval and societal transformation in America. It is defined as the era of activism as workers, people of color, women, and other minorities rose up to demand justice and equality. With cases surrounding the civil rights movement, the Burnside versus Byers case empowered students to assert their First Amendment rights against systematic oppression. Yet critics argued the protest disturbed societal order and the legislative process, especially in schools. Meanwhile, the Vietnam War was casting a long shadow over America. By 1965, the war had escalated to millions of casualties, prompting great public discontent. Across the nation, students organized protests, boycotts, and marches, calling attention to the growing human cost of the war. However, many argued that these anti-war demonstrations were unpatriotic and detrimental to military morale. Government and educational authorities often framed such activism as an act of rebellion rather than a constitutional right, creating tension between demands for societal change and institutional efforts to maintain order and control. It all began in 1965 when Mary Beth, John, and Christopher decided to wear black armbands to school, protesting for the truce of the Vietnam War. However, what they thought would be an act of expression became an act of controversy. School officials, fearing this action would disrupt the classroom, enacted a policy against them before they would arrive. Any student wearing an armband would face suspension. Mary Beth, John, and Christopher decided to proudly wear their armbands, aware of the consequences and pursuing their activism either way. After strange stares in the cafeteria and tense conversations in the principal's office, they were suspended and sent home. The Tinkers and Edgards, in reaction to the school's open violation of the students' First Amendment rights, decided to take legal action. Represented by the ACLU, the students' families sued the school district for violating their free speech. The case began in Iowa, but quickly escalated through the courts. At each level, the Tinkers faced defeat, with the courts siding with the school every time. They argued that the armbands could disrupt the learning environment and that school should not be a space for student activism. However, the Tinker family refused to give up, believing that students had a firm right to free speech, especially in schools, where students should learn to discuss controversial debates and address the current societal and political climate. In 1968, the case finally reached the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court doesn't take very many cases, though. Back then, they took about 80 per year out of around 10,000 that want to be heard.
Dan Johnston, a young lawyer from Des Moines, argued that the students caused no substantial disruption and that the school overreacted to their peaceful protest. This established the substantial disruption test, which became a cornerstone of student free speech law. It stated schools could only censor speech if it caused a material and substantial interference with schoolwork or discipline. Johnston cited prior cases surrounding student rights and the responsibilities of authorities to support his argument. For example, the Epperson versus Arkansas case revolved around the state educational board prohibiting the teaching of scientific evolution. The court ruled that the school was violating teachers' right to free speech and the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, stating that the school's undoubted right to prescribe the curriculum for its public schools does not carry with it the right to prohibit, on pain of criminal penalty, the teaching of a scientific theory or doctrine where that prohibition is based upon reasons that violate the First Amendment. He also referred to the aforementioned Burnside versus Byers case, where students were punished for wearing freedom buttons, advocating for the right to vote for people of color.
These kids in Mississippi eventually won their case, and the court said that they should have had their right to wear those buttons and to use their First Amendment rights because they didn't substantially disrupt school.
In Chicago, Father Arthur Terminiello caused chaos with a controversial speech attacking political and racial groups. Arrested for breach of the peace after sparking a riot, his conviction was overturned by the Supreme Court, which ruled the ordinance unconstitutional. The court declared that the vitality of civil and political institutions depends on free discussion, adding that speech could only be restricted if it posed a clear and present danger far beyond mere inconvenience, annoyance, or unrest. Justice Douglas summarized, "A function of free speech is to invite dispute. It may indeed best serve its high purpose when it stirs people to anger." Opposing Johnston, attorney Alan A. Herrick argued schools had an obligation to maintain order, stating,
Officials of the developed school district have the responsibility for maintaining a scholarly, disciplined atmosphere within the classroom. These officials not only have a right have an obligation to prevent anything which might be disruptive of such an atmosphere.
Johnston countered,
authorities that are running the schools under the authority given by them by the Constitution of the United States and within the provisions of that Constitution. And the whole nub of our case is that they've exceeded their powers under that. Thank you.
On February 24, 1969, the Supreme Court delivered its decision. In a 7-2 ruling, the justices sided with the Tinkers, stating that neither students nor teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. The decision was groundbreaking, the first to affirm student-free speech in schools. While civil libertarians celebrated, some educators and conservatives feared it would undermine authority. Still, the substantial disruption test protected minority viewpoints, reinforcing that students' voices are vital to democracy. For the Tinkers and all students across America, it proved that civic courage matters. Even when others call you a threat, dissent and discussion are essential to justice. The Supreme Court's 1969 decision in Tinker v. Des Moines sent immediate waves across the nation. For the first time, the court unequivocally declared that students' voices mattered, even within school walls. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a cultural shift. Almost overnight, students across the country felt newly empowered to speak out. Anti-war protests, civil rights demonstrations, and debates over social justice spilled into hallways and classrooms. Schools transformed from places of passive learning into platforms for activism, as young people tested the boundaries of their rights. Yet the ruling also sparked tension. School administrators, accustomed to controlling student expression, now faced a legal tightrope. Without proof of substantial disruption, they could no longer silence dissent. In the short term, the Tinker v. Des Moines case sparked debates about the extent of student rights and how schools had a responsibility to balance free expression while maintaining order in the classroom.
So there's a responsibility for schools to step up and find ways to talk about these things. Yes, we can talk about things that we disagree with respect for each other instead of censoring things. And then there's a responsibility on the part of students to know their rights, learn their rights, and then use them. Because that's the way you keep your rights, and that's the way you make a difference in the world, and you don't just accept the way we're doing things right now. The way we're doing things is we can do better.
While the immediate effects of the Tinker Des Moines case were mostly felt in the classrooms of America, it would cement its long-term impact as one of the most significant cases in First Amendment history. The ruling established the priorly discussed substantial disruption test, a legal standard that continues to shape how courts evaluate student speech cases. This test ensures that schools cannot silence students unless their actions significantly interfere with education or discipline. Moreover, the Tinker decision didn't just protect symbolic speech like wearing armbands. It became a foundation for all forms of student expression. It's why students today can organize walkouts, wear protest clothing, or post political opinions online. Mary Beth Tinker herself became a symbol, proving that youth voices could reshape society. Student voices have pioneered social change throughout history, from walkouts during the civil rights movement to modern-day protests like the March for Our Lives and climate strikes. Young activists have relied on this precedent, and our societal progress often depends on youth-led change. Mary Beth Tinker and her fight for student rights remain vital in our collective history. However, the Tinker's legacy has not gone unchallenged. Later Supreme Court cases refined its scope, allowing schools to regulate speech that is vulgar in the Bethel v. Fraser case, or tied to school-sponsored activities like Hazelwood v. Coulomere. Still, the resolution of the Tinker v. Des Moines case endures in its principle. Students do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate.
It's a challenge, but we're in it together, all of us, people all over the world. You are joined with young people all over the world who are speaking up to make a better, more peaceful, more just world and to change what needs to be changed. So I think about this issue of students' free speech rights, not only as far as students in our country, but students all over the world, because we're joined with people all over the world to take the world in a better direction.
The Tinker v. Des Moines case was more than just a legal battle over black armbands. It was a turning point in American history that redefined the balance between rights and responsibilities in education. As new challenges emerge, like online speech and social media, the principles established by the Tinker Des Moines case remain more relevant than ever. The case reminds us that even in times of conflict, freedom of expression is not just a right, it's a responsibility that we all share. As Mary Beth Tinker says,
I say, speak up, know your rights, and use them.